Good. Okay. Welcome to the SIG CLI meeting. It's April 11th, and we are going to kick off our today's meetings with Paris and a retrospective of 1.10. Paris, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. It feels like yesterday that I was just here doing a contributor experience update. I'm actually including the link to the retrospective document both in the SIG agenda today as well as the Zoom chat. This is going to be a much shorter version of our 1.10 community release. This is just some SIGs that like to do retros on their own features and work and things like that. So it's really good. Oh, actually, let me turn my notifications off here too, so you don't hear those. This is really good for your SIG to really start talking about exactly what you would expect out of a retro, like what went well, what could have gone better, what could we do differently. There are some house rules really quick. If you'd like to speak, obviously if there's not many other folks speaking, just speak up. But if there are quite a few folks speaking, just on the retrospective document, go in there and make a note under a bullet that you have a talk topic and your name so that we can call on you. If you have something to say but do not want to either post this publicly or would rather have me say it on your behalf anonymously, feel free to reach out to me in Zoom chat. This should not be us putting blame on any one individual. This should be us putting constructive criticism against processes, procedures, systems, etc., that we know we can do better. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments before we get started? All right. So first things first. Typically in a normal retro, we would go back to the action items that we collected from the last retro. Since this is my first retro with you all, I'm not sure if you had one for 1.9. So we're actually going to go ahead and skip that part. If you feel like there was discussions about 1.9 that either we did do or we did not hit, just go ahead and populate this, and this document will also be circulated at some point this week for the SIG. So let's actually jump right into like what went well in 1.10. Does anybody want to kick us off with what they think went really well, either an accolade for someone or something, or just a process that went really well?
I think the implementation of the server-side printing went very well. So I would like to call out Clayton and Juan for driving the majority of the work for that feature. We didn't have any major problems with the feature. It went pretty smoothly. So I think that'll be my point for what went well in 1.10.
Awesome. Way to go, Clayton, if he's on the line.
Clayton and Juan.
And Juan. Okay. All right. Anyone else? This can just be observations, especially if you weren't necessarily involved. Anything that you were a part of or saw that went well in 1.10. All right. We can always go back to this as well for some other comments. Next. So what could have gone better in 1.10? This is maybe areas of improvement or things that did not necessarily go as expected.
From my perspective, I think that we sort of failed the part of responding to the flakes. It happened that the SIG CLI several times were called out as not responding to flakes fast enough, and generally the flakiness in the CLI bits are something that I would like to improve over time.
How do you think that, so just to follow up with this, like as an action, what do you feel like, well, not what do you feel like, what do you feel, how do you feel like this could be worked on for improvement? Is there something that you can work on with the release team to be better? Is there an internal process that we can build that might make things a little bit easier on Flakes?
So definitely the emails that are being sent out, I think weekly or every other week, for Flakes and the SIGs, which are owning them. This is definitely something that is very valuable for me as a SIG lead. It's easy for me to figure out, are there any flakes, because I'm personally not actively monitoring all the flakes. And such a summary, I can't remember, sorry, the name of the person that is sending out those emails, but she's monitoring those very frequently and ensuring that the flakes, if they do pop up, the appropriate SIGs are being called out in the Kubernetes dev mailing list. So that's definitely something that helps to improve and limit the number of flakes and ensure that the SIGs, including SIG CLI, is capable of responding to the flakes.
All right. Anyone else have anything to add for what could have gone better in 1.10? Again, don't necessarily have to call out individuals. Something that maybe you saw that went awry.
So I have a comment regarding that flake stuff. So I think maybe our SIG can set up a on-call rotation for monitoring the health for the SIG CLI related test, and that person should be responsible for triaging and find someone to fix that. And I think that will improve our current situation.
I have heard about some other SIGs that have started to put in similar.
The other additional thing that I think that we need to do is we need to ensure and improve the quality of the tests that we have for the SIG CLI bits. From the multiple reviews that I've been doing over the several past weeks and months, I've noticed that there are a significant amount of tests that are not good enough for testing the functionality behind them. So all of us should be more careful about improving the quality of the test at whichever bit of functionality we're touching within the scope of our SIG.
All right. And anyone else? So we have flakes and tests. Someone in the apps release made a comment that they thought the release was boring, which was awesome. Does anybody agree with that for this crew? Meaning it was boring and nothing went necessarily amazing and nothing necessarily went great. So therefore it was a solid release.
Yeah, I can sign up under the solid release statement, definitely.
Okay, that's good. That's really good to hear. All right, last call for what could have gone better. And again, we don't necessarily need to add these now. You can take some time this week and add these. They'll be attached to your agenda. I know for the community release retrospective, we definitely had folks add in after the fact, and folks are actually still reviewing that document, and it's going to be under review in SIG release. So these documents are getting digested. So definitely feel free to add value to these for the project. All right, let's go ahead and move on then to the last item. What can we do differently for 1.10 and beyond? And this is really our actions here. And so far, what I've collected is paying attention to the KDev emails, the summaries, and then also possibly set up a rotation for triage to improve the flake situation, and also review tests and look for areas of improvement. Does anybody have anything else for what could go differently? And this doesn't necessarily mean what stems from what went wrong either, but maybe something that that you think even went good that you would like to continue or maybe even take further. Sean, were you trying to speak or you were just hopping on?
No, sorry, Paris.
No, it's okay. Just making sure. Last call. This is great. I know it sounds awkward, but for retrospectives, boring is good. But let's definitely get into the habit of talking about these things, especially the what went well, and giving folks accolades as much as possible. So if that's it, then we'll go ahead and wrap this piece. Any last comments? All right. The meeting is now back to CLI topics. Well, this will be CLI topics, but.
Thank you very much, Paris. I think that we will be able, starting from this release, to ensure that we are doing the retrospective on every single, after every single release, and then we could be able to improve the quality of the SIG CLI stuff.
Yeah, this is good. This is a really good start. So
thanks very much, Paris, for the time.
Of course. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, with the retrospective done, we can now focus on the other bits. I've noted 2 stuff, but I'll probably go ahead and add one another that Menji proposed is the flake rotation topic. So we will definitely, I would like to discuss this topic with the rest of the group. So first, maybe, Menji, you've added the topic of creating Kubernetes SIG client libs repositories last time.
Yes.
Can you walk us through?
Sure. Can you go to that doc? Thank you. So this is a one-pager design doc for this shared library. So the goal for this repo is we put the library that can be shared by kubectl and other client. We want to have a repo that can be rendered. So right now the situation is the library that people may want to use live under the kubectl directory, which if you want to use them, you need to render the whole Kubernetes/Kubernetes repo, which can be a nightmare for the people who want to develop their own client. And for some library, it's not very suitable to put them in client Go because they are not the piece that is necessary to talking to the server. So I'm proposing a repo under the Kubernetes-SIG, and I'm proposing the name to be called client-libs. I'm also open to other names. And I have talked to Stefan, and he is the owner of the publishing bot, and he said that it's not hard to set up the publishing bot to mirror the repo in staging to the Kubernetes SIG organization.
Yeah, I totally support this idea. But before we will be able to do that, there are several problems that we have. The first and the biggest problem is, and I actually pointed it out as one of the future topics that I wanted to bring up, is the Kubernetes/kubectl repo that we have. That repo was meant to be just the thing that you're talking about, a common set of functionality that will be first and most importantly vendored in Kubernetes and used inside of Kubernetes for building the kubectl command. But then additionally at the same time would allow other users to build their own CLI tools. Unfortunately, the kubectl repository, which was initially intended for just tracking the issues, started to grow in I'm not sure which way currently. And I know that there are some people that are actively using the contents from that repo in their projects. And this is a major problem because at the description in that repo, we are stating that this is vendored in Kubernetes and that the Kubernetes kubectl is actually using the code in that repo, which is not true. So that's one problem. The other problem is that currently the functionality that we have in the kubectl in Kubernetes is so tightly coupled with the API machinery and all the rest of the Kubernetes code that we need a little bit of time to actually be able to separate such functionality for exclusion to a staging repo. And actually, both Huan and myself, the work that we're doing around the printers is going in exactly that direction, to be able to extract some common functionality in a library that will be then usable by other community members. And actually, the part about publishing the repo is, I think, the smallest problems that we have, because I can talk to Stefan, and that's as simple as just adding additional configuration options for the Kubernetes for kubectl related bits that we want to have in the staging repo. This basically goes all the way to discussion that we had for a good couple months before, when we try to extract the entire kubectl outside of Kubernetes repo. This basically goes all the way to that there's a lot of work needed to be performed up front before we will be able to extract that bit out. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, makes sense. So, you know that extracting all the Kubernetes, all the kubectl code out, it's hard. May take multiple quarters to do that. And so before that happen, we cannot have some code that is not under the staging, because if there's some code that is not under staging, this can be import loop, dependency loop.
Yeah. I think David Eads mentioned that several meetings ago, and that we can slowly start biting the split by adding stuff to the staging repo as soon as they are in a reasonable way to be separated out of the kubectl. So with slow steps, we will be building our staging repo. And once we are happy with the shape of the actual libraries in that staging repo, we will be then able to publish those for consumption by other users. I think that could be the simplest approach for this.
Yeah. So
That will
another is
be, yeah, go ahead.
another comment related to this is so that repo which is mirror from the staging, I think it should be completely managed by the publishing bot. In other words, humans should not directly contribute to that. So there, I don't want to see a repo that is half managed by the bot, half managed by the human. It's not the state we want to go.
No. What I meant is, by staging, I mean that we will be moving the bits into the staging under Kubernetes repo, just to ensure that whatever we move to the staging, under staging directory in Kubernetes repo, that these bits are not being used in any other bits of Kubernetes, so that we have problems when using so. And once we are happy with the contents of that staging directory, only then we will be able to turn on the publishing bot. The publishing bit will always be fully automatic. There's no human involved in it. That's what I meant with the staging. The staging as the directory being the entry point for the actual publication of the libraries for the kubectl stuff. This will be also important, and I would even say crucial, for the plugin authors, because once we have the framework for building the plugins, we would like them to reuse as much of the functionality that we already have in kubectl in their own plugins.
Yeah, makes sense.
Oh, okay, awesome. So we will be slowly going in that direction. I'll try to sync with David and Stefan how to best approach the topic of the staging directory, because that would have to be the first step before we will be able to actually publish any code for consumption.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, so we have that topic covered. And actually, the second topic is the flags in kubectl, which is basically a continuation of the work that Juan and I started on doing with the printers. So to shortly recap the printers, we are building structures that will, along with methods that know how to construct a proper printer based on the arguments that are specified by the users. Then any comment author will be responsible for just using the structure as one of the options elements in the struct for every command, and then just invoke toPrinter method, which will return an appropriate printer that the user requested. This is to simplify and unify the user experience for printing the objects with kubectl commands. And additionally, on top of that, we would like to be able to do exactly the same thing with flags. We will start with record flags, because what we from the short discovery that we did to the code, the record is the next one that is probably the most frequently used, and we will try to introduce a record structure, which will have a toRecord method helper as well, which will be able to, based on the flags, to record the object as it is currently done for apply and several other commands where record is being used. And the end goal of the Flux refactoring that we're hoping to is that all the flags will be always defined as a field inside of a structure, so that every command has a structure where all their options are being specified. This will enable us to simplify the testing, unify the commands, and improve the quality overall. Juan, have I said everything that I wanted to say, or did I forget about something else?
Yes, so I think you covered pretty well what the main intention is. I guess I would also add that we don't just plan on covering the remainder of commands, we also plan on covering configuration. So basically, like Matcha said, anything that depends on flag values is fair game for this, which includes obtaining a REST client, obtaining a kubeconfig from global options, pretty much anything. And so what the big picture for this starts to look like is you basically have groups of flags throughout the code base that are grouped by a structure and can be consumed either by our code base or by third-party consumers of the API as well. They can basically obtain a struct and not have to worry about which flags go with particular functionality. So I guess I would encapsulate all of this as we plan on taking common functionality across the code base, and for each set of flags that provide one common functionality, those are grouped under a struct.
Yeah, and the end goal is that we will be able to provide the common functionality for all kubectl built-in plugins, but as well for the consumers of the staging, hopefully staging library for kubectl-like stuff, because we will be the first consumer of that library as kubectl, but other users, and I'm targeting here the plugin authors most probably, but not only those, not limited to those. We will be able to provide them with those libraries. So that's basically the end goal of all those refactorings. Do you have any questions, comments on this topic? Okay, hearing none. So let's move to the last topic that was brought up and that was actually initiated during the retro that we had earlier, especially that I see a lot of people are very supportive for this idea, is the on-call rotation to monitor the SIG CLI tests. Well, aside from the fact that we need to improve, and I'll be actually, but I'll leave it for the next time in 2 weeks, the testing guide for the kubectl, but that's probably a bigger topic that I would like to cover the next time. But we can start with trying to figure out how the on-call rotation would look like, and maybe we'll create the initial list for dealing with those. Minji, do you have any ideas how we could start implementing those? The current approach that I'm taking is that whenever there's the kube dev email about flakes, I'm looking for SIG CLI, and either I'm reaching out. Well, last time I was talking with you because I've noticed that you were pinged on the issues, and I was also talking to I can't remember her name. She was dealing with those flakes, and eventually, as a continuation, I also picked up some further fixes to the to the issue, so that we are able to fix the problems and get rid of those lists. So do you have any suggestions how we can approach the topic?
I know that there is a open source on-call project. Maybe we can set up a deployment for that and use that to start the on-call rotation. So I can chat you the the link to that project?
Yeah, if you find the link, it would be nice to include it into the agenda. The other idea that I have is it would be good to sync with the other 6 that Paris mentioned that are either discussing or maybe they already implemented the idea of having the on-call rotation for the tests, and see how they approach the topic, and maybe cooperate with them because maybe they already have those the software for them implemented. It'll be very easier for us to add our bits of configuration for this topic. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. I remember Paris said the SIG apps have some on-call rotation for that. We can
Yeah,
reach them
she
to see.
mentioned SIG apps, but unfortunately Matt Farina, who was present earlier, left some time mid through somewhere in the middle of the meeting. So I can personally try to ping Matt and see and try to figure out what they are using, how they are using it, or what are the progress that they are making on this topic. And hopefully we'll slowly try to bite the problem. Yeah, Sean, you also like the idea. Do you have any idea how other SIGs are approaching this on-call rotation for the monitoring tests? Okay. I didn't hear anything from Sean. So I think the last bit before we will be closing today's meetings is maybe stand-ups and the progress information about the ongoing bigger topics. Juan, would you mind giving us an update on how the printers are going?
Sure. So we're basically starting to work with printers by first merging all the flags, all the flag structs that we plan on having. So those include a single structure for each printer type that we've identified. So one for human readable, one for name and success printing, another for JSON and YAML, another for template printing, and the last one for custom columns. So now that we have those 5 structures merged, what we're working on now is basically wiring those structures at the command level. So whether you're aware of it or not, right now, every single call to a printer ends up going through a method called getStandardPrinter, which examines the output format passed by a user. And from that, it uses a giant switch to determine, okay, which printer should I return based on that output format. So the ongoing work basically aims to no longer use this flow, but rather have each command instantiate a flag structure and essentially use that flag structure to bind all the flags and then obtain a printer from that as well. So right now we've tackled all the set commands. So all the set commands are currently using this pattern. There is a pull request in flight that targets all the create commands. And after that is merged, then we have another one that continues with more sets of commands. So some shortcomings or some potential things to note that have been highlighted through this work have been that we came into this with the expectation that human readable output was mainly or entirely a part of the get command. So we didn't expect users, and still don't expect users, to rely on human readable output from, say, a create command. But we did see that in some parts of the code, such as tests, some tests were expecting, for example, human readable output under some circumstances. So a side goal of this work would be to define what kind of output we should and should not expect from commands. So the ideal situation would be to isolate human readable output to the get command, potentially look into having maybe template output as part of create and set commands. So right now they only support success printing and JSON YAML printing, as you'd expect. But in some tests actually made use of template printing, so we're looking into that as well. So the main goal is to, once we have the printers wired, basically have groups of these structures depending on which commands are using them. So if we are dealing with the get command would have a struct that composes only the structures containing the flags that get needs, such as the human readable bits, the JSON YAML bits, the template and custom column bits. And then for create, we would have its own struct that then composes all the bits it needs, like only the name success printer, JSON YAML, and maybe template. So once we wire all of these flags to commands, we then go in and identify what the expectation is for that command's output. So right now we're currently in the wiring process, and after that we'll be examining everything else. If there's any questions, I'd like to answer them now.
Thanks, Juan, for a very detailed update. Are there any questions to Juan? Okay, hearing none. I think we covered all the topics that we had for today, and I think I'm going to give you back the 10 minutes of the original time, especially that the last time we were over time by at least 10 or 15 minutes. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining the call, and see you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks.